Alright, so we are now working on the dash. This is a piece of Meranti 1/4 inch marine, same thing that the hull is made out of. And I've cut a strip, it's about 6.5 wide by 15 long. And then I have ripped a really special 2x4. I know it sounds funky. This is my dash, and we'll get better pictures of that in more detail. But I cut an oval out of my dash, and then with my shiny new DeWalt router, which I love, I highly recommend the compact DeWalt router. I did a 3/8 round over on the face of it. It's hard to see, but there's a circle cut out here for one of my switches. There's another circle cut out here for one of my switches, also round over on both of them. And then you can probably see it, I flipped it over, and again with my awesome router, I routed a step in the back side of that. So this really special 2x4 is going to get laminated onto this for a total thickness of a 1/2 inch, and then recessed into the back of the dash, and it'll be the surround for my gauges. You may or may not be able to see the step that I routed in here. But so I'm getting ready to do some lamination work for the background of the dash, and there'll also be a small round one for the background of the switch holes. You can see here is my steering helm unit. It's all cut out and ready to go, but we'll get better pictures of the dash as I'm done. I just wanted to show this lamination work that we're getting ready to do. And there is a backstory on this piece of 2x4. We'll get into that later. So here's a quick update. We now got our lamination board. You can see what's left of the oval cut out over here. This is our template, so I could get my layout right. But we now have our board that we laminated the uber special pieces of 2x4 cut out. It is installed. It's not installed, it's just setting in the back of the dash here. I've got a couple of 2x4s that just kind of hold it into that recess until it gets glued in. But I'm just testing the fit of everything. And man, the combination of the light and the dark, when this thing's epoxied, it's going to look awesome. It looks awesome now, but so there's our gauges. All of our gaps look really nice. Everything is matching. The round over bit, I think, just really made this oval. It gave it a really nice look, really clean. So you can see the round over we've done here. This will be one of my switches. Over here will be my ignition switch. Same thing, round over. And then this one is for the steering helm. So, you know, what I did is I took a look at some pictures of like late 70s Chevy pickups to kind of get an idea of where the steering wheel was in relationship to the gauges, in relationship to the switches and key switch, ignition switch. So I did my best to kind of mimic that late 70s Chevy kind of dash look. So anyhow, we're making good progress. I've got to pull these gauges back out now. I'm going to take some of my extra cutoffs. These are from my hole saw, and I'm going to recess it up inside here and up inside here so that those holes match the background just like the gauges. But so I've got to do that still. You can see the small donuts and the large donuts. There's my gauge layout again. I used it as a backer when I was drilling through the real one, just so I didn't damage my bit. Now this is the particular bit that I picked up. It's called an adjustable circle cutter or hole saw, but I like it because you can loosen up this Allen and slide this to any diameter you want versus buying a toothed hole saw and getting close and having the gauges, sloppy in the holes. I can cut this thing to where it's got just a few thousandths of clearance, and the gauges fit nice and tight in there. There's no rattle or wobble. So that's the reason I actually went with this. The last time I used a circle cutter or adjustable hole saw like this was in the 8th grade, and I've still got the scar on my finger to prove it. So picked one of those up so I could cut perfect, flawless holes. The depth of cut, really, it's not made to cut deeper than 3/4, and since this particular board is 1 inch, it didn't like it. it did not like cutting through all the way through. In fact, you can see on this one, I had to flip the board over using my pilot and drill from the other side to match it on the larger sized hole. On the smaller holes, it did go all the way through, but it did not like it. So that's the bit that I used for drilling those, again, because I have experience with toothed hole saws, and they can really make a hole ugly. And it wouldn't matter really underneath the gauges, other than it wouldn't be a perfect fit because it's covered by the bezel. But out here on this part, you would definitely have seen a jagged, ugly hole. So another reason why I went with that. Not to mention, you know, that was like $17. And if it's, obviously it's a cheap one. If it's only enough to drill these holes, I got my money's worth and I don't care, but it's still in great shape. Versus buying some toothed hole saws, you know, I probably would have had, I don't know, between the 2 for here, well, the 3 for this different size, 4 for that size. Yeah, I probably would have had $100 worth of hole saws that I may or may not ever use again, versus that I can use, you know, until it quits working. I mean, you can replace the pilot bit, you can sharpen the outside cutter. So, I mean, I really don't see it going to hell. I mean, anyhow. So that's where we are. This piece of wood I'll talk about a little bit. This is a piece of African mahogany, and it is just absolutely flawless grain. I mean, flawless. The last trip when I went to go purchase more of my floor plank material, this was the first time the supplier actually had 1-inch thick material. Everything I bought prior to this, every other part on the boat is 13/16. And he just happened to have several of these 1-inch boards, all with absolutely flawless grain. I mean, flawless, perfect grain. And here's the cutoff from that board. It's absolutely flawless. And he had several of these. And I thought, you know what? If I have to build a dash, because I couldn't fit my gauges in the existing frame 4, if I have to build a dash for this thing, this is the board that I want to build it out of. So I bought it not knowing if I would need it or not. And I'm glad I did, because it is beautiful. So just a quick update. We pulled the gauges back out. They are safely in their little box over there. So we can continue work on the dash. So this is what it looks like. And this is unsanded. I mean, this is exactly how the holes look when you cut them with that adjustable circle cutter. It's really flawless, nice square edges. You can flip the blade. You can see this has got kind of an offset. You can flip the blade 180 so that either your circle is perfectly smooth or your outside hole is perfectly smooth, depending on which way you have the cutter in there. Or you can do what I did on these inserts and just belt sand that little ridge off there. So, I mean, choice is up to you. But as you can see, we've got this switch backer installed. Same with this one. This switch backer is installed. They're not drilled to the actual hole until the switches are hole size, until the switches show up. But I'll use that as my pilot to punch the correct size hole, dead center of it. So we're making fantastic progress. So we now have a really quick epoxy encapsulation coat on my inserts. Obviously they're not glued in the dash yet, but I wanted to get this material, this Douglas fir, I wanted to get it encapsulated because it has a habit. This was a green board. It wasn't ran through our kilns at work, so it has a habit. Even though it's dried for, you know, going on 3 months now, it still has a habit of surface molding because it wasn't kiln dried. So I wanted to get, as soon as I finished the cutouts and test fit and everything was good, I wanted to get epoxy over it so that can't happen. We'll try to get some gloss. Yeah, there you can see a little gloss on it. You can see it's real bubbly. Just like the hull was. I'll have to finish sand this again and then recoat it with epoxy to make it like glass, but when I'm done it'll be just beautiful. So that's where we are now.
You can only go up once.
Well, what do you boys think? Is it kid approved?
Yes.
All right, we now have the inserts after they've been coated in epoxy. I sanded up the contact surfaces underneath this recess and around the face of the gauge, or gauge backer, and mixed up some epoxy, applied it around inside of that groove on all three, this one and this one as well. My ignition switch showed up, so we drilled that hole to 3/4 of an inch. So it's ready to go. But they're all gluing in now. Let it sit up overnight. I can pull all my clamps and start test fitting it in the boat, get my brackets built. Making good progress. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna show you how I drew the oval, how to draw a perfect oval every time. So what you do is you determine what size you want your oval to be. And in my opinion, the best looking ovals are twice as wide as they are tall. So for demonstration purposes, we've just chose a 6 by 12, 6 inch by 12. So the first thing I do is I just lay out a straight line and then a perpendicular line, just roughly in the center. So you got a straight line, then a perpendicular 90-degree line straight out of the center of it. Then what you do is you take half of the height. So for instance, this is going to be a 6-inch oval. So I've measured up 3 inches and I've made a mark right here. Then you take half of your overall width, but you don't start at this point. You start at the 3-inch mark and you measure down until you cross the perpendicular line. So if I were to take 6 inches and pull out here, it'd actually end up out in here somewhere. So when you do your half of your width, you actually pull that measurement from the half of the height measurement, not from down here. So I've marked one here and one here. The next thing we're going to do is take 3 little nails. I'm going to stick it right on that center line. I'm just going to tap it in lightly. Try to keep the nails as close to standing up straight as you can. And the last little nail. So we have 3 nails in here. The next thing you want to get is some string. And what you're looking for is something, this is some like poly twine, just something that does not stretch. I tried using cotton, and that was actually a huge mistake because you could stretch it varying your pressure. It made for a really loppy, weird, funky shape that was not an oval. So you want something ideally that does not stretch. So then you're going to take this rope and you're going to wrap it around the 3, and we're going to just tie a granny knot in it here, as snug as you can. You don't want to stretch any of these. If you just want to have it fairly snug, we'll tie a double granny knot in it here, and then I'll try to take all of the slack out of it just by snugging up the knot. So once you get to this point, you're going to pull out your middle nail up here. Now I've taken a pencil and I just kind of ground a little groove around the tip so it rides around this better. But you take your pencil, stick it in there, and then you just follow the string. Oh, dang it, we broke it. But you get the point. I'll just freehand this last section and I broke my pencil. But anyhow, that's how you draw a perfect oval. And you can do this to any dimension, whatever you want your dimensions to be. You know, for instance, the one on my boat was actually 11¼ by 5½. So, I mean, the dimensions don't really matter, but ideally, in my opinion, the best looking ovals are twice as wide as they are tall. So that's how I did it. Now you can run out in the garage and test this yourself. It works very well every time. Had I not broken my pencil, this might have been a little more impressive. Well, we made Swiss cheese out of frame 4. I set my dash up in there. You can see I put these little 12 or 10-degree wedges, cut them out to fit. There's one on each side. There's one over here. So that sets my dash at 10 degrees, which I really liked how it looked. So I built these wedges, got those glued on. Then I clamped my dash in place, and with a Sharpie marker, I traced the outline of my gauges, of my steering helm. There's actually a 3rd bolt right up here on the top that with my dash in there, you wouldn't be able to get to. So I had to drill a 3/4 inch access hole all the way through so I can stick a socket through frame 4 to tighten up the helm or remove it if I ever need to. And this over here is my cutout for my ignition switch. So we Swiss cheese the hell out of the dash, but we're getting ready, or frame 4, we're getting ready to install the dash. So here's a quick update. We've got the dash clamped in, test fit. After I test fit everything the first time, then I marked out frame 4 to where I needed to cut these out, and you can see it's kind of cut in a funny shape here to clear the gauges. My light switch, I did not have to cut it out. Now that's actually a GM, like late 70s Chevy pickup light switch, and people are probably going to say, well, why the hell would you use that? Well, because I can get 5 functions out of one switch. They're super easy to wire, but I can get my stern light, my bow light, my dash lights, along with dimmable dash lights, and my interior LED lighting, all controlled off of one switch, as well as my bilge pumps. So I can control, 5 different things off of one single switch, and that's why I went with this. Now, normally they have a little round male hollow bolt that holds it to the dash. Those are apparently unicorn teeth. You just can't find them. They don't exist. I could have ordered it offline, but instead I actually took the bracket apart, took the switch apart, took the steel half of the bracket, and I made my own. You can see 2 screws here. There's also 2 screws on the other side. But I made my own screwable base and welded it to that existing bracket with some nice little tacks, painted it all up black and pretty, so I can screw that GM switch to the back of the dash. So if you order a GM switch to do the same kind of thing with, it's not going to mount up like this one did, because I had to custom build this little bracket. But anyhow, that's a GM headlight switch. Got my gauges just sitting in here to test my clearance cuts. Everything clears. Here's my ignition switch, and here is my part of my rack helm unit. I haven't bolted the actual rack on top or ran the cable, but we're just test fitting. Obviously we're sticking up, so I need to fair that off just like I did all the other frames. It's the exact same process. So let's take a look at how it looks. So here's my steering wheel adapter. This is for marine tapered 3/4 inch taper to Momo 6-bolt pattern. Right now I have about 1/8 of an inch gap here, and when I snug this up, because I haven't tightened the adapter down to the helm unit, it's just loosely sitting on there. But when I tighten that up, that should shrink that gap to about 1/16. It's going to look really clean. But take a look at that. You can see my ignition switch over here. You can see the background around it. Here's my steering wheel, beautiful gauges. You can just barely see here the GM headlight switch factory knob, little chrome knob. I love the look. It just looks fantastic against the background. And again, this is going to darken up. The dash will darken up like the side, the carlings here. So it'll be a much darker, much closer to the steering wheel. But it turned out beautiful. That thing is awesome. I'm so proud of that dash. So here's kind of a look at the little switch there. The headlight switch, just a standard GM headlight switch. But we're just test fitting to see how everything's gonna work out, and it looks beautiful. It really looks nice in there. I just real quick kind of mocked up my seat base height and sat in there to make sure, there was enough clearance above my legs to the steering wheel, and that my armrest height was about right. Zip's a beautiful boat, but it's not very deep, and if you put a floor in it like I did, you have to make sure you keep your seat height and everything very, very low, kind of like riding in a sports car with your legs almost straight out in front of you. Otherwise, you'll look like you're sitting on top of the damn thing and it looks like a toy. So that's one thing I wanted to check, kind of my seat heights, to make sure everything is going to work out. Again, the dash is sitting at a 10-degree angle, and that's 10 degrees from the floor, not the keel. Making fantastic progress. So let's talk for a minute as to why in the world would I take strips of 2x4 and make them the focal point of my dash. I mean, I know to a lot of people that's not going to make any damn sense at all. I think it's beautiful. But the funny part is I also think Douglas fir is an ugly wood. So why would I do that? I work at a wood mill. I'm a millwright supervisor. I was a millwright, still a millwright, but not quite so much of it now. But I knew that somewhere in this boat, somewhere I was going to use a piece of wood that came from my mill. I figured, because in my opinion, it's not a very pretty wood, I was just going to use it structurally somewhere for brackets or somewhere where it would be hidden, I'd just use a piece of wood from our mill to say, that's why. Just a little tip of the hat to my profession and the mill that I work at. However, we recently just fired up a brand new small log processor, an entire new sawmill line. We added on to our mill. Huge project. It was a lot of fun. But this particular piece of wood, this is what I have left. These were the ones that I culled out for one reason or another, whether they were split or whatever the reason, had knots in them. I picked the very best ones. But I got a piece of the very first log through that small log sawmill. And this background of my dash, along with these are the extras. So the background around my dash, the background behind my switch, and the background around my ignition switch are a piece of that very first log through the sawmill. It was a small log. It made, I want to say, 2 8-foot 2x4s. I mean, it was a very small log, maybe 5-inch diameter. But I was fortunate enough to latch on to the very first piece of wood that came out of that machine, and this is it. And it's very, very special to me. And that's why I decided, you know what, I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Number one, I wanted to have a piece of wood from my work in this boat. But number two, it's a very, very, very special 2x4 to me. Probably no one else on the planet, maybe a few guys at my work, but to me, it's a very special piece of wood. So I decided to make it the absolute focal point of my dash. And I think it's beautiful. And personally, I think Douglas fir is ugly. So I'm going to show you a little portion of video that is this exact piece of wood, the very first log through the new small log sawmill. The log you see that's going to run through the video, the very first one, is this actual piece of wood being sawn into a 2x4. So we'll skip over to that portion of the video now. That's why I use the 2x4 in my dash. Little progress update here. We've got the back of the dash all encapsulated in epoxy, as well as the bottom. Not the top, because we have to fair that beveled to match frame 4, and also not the face. I'll do that after it's mounted in the boat. But we've got the epoxy encapsulation coat on the back of it. We also have all of the cutouts in the dash, all of that fresh wood where I cut it out. That's all been encapsulated in epoxy to seal it. And then I also added 3 additional 10-degree wedges to the frame. Originally we had this one and this one. So I added 3 more to support it. You can see there's an 1.5 inch silicon bronze screw protruding. That's actually what I use to kind of pinch them on there till the epoxy sets up. So when I'm done, I'll pull these 3 screws out. We'll get the dash in there, clamped on each side like it was and positioned. And then I'll epoxy these and run the screws all the way through the back of the dash. They're not deep enough to penetrate the dash, but they'll go 3/4 of the way through it and really make a good bond. And after these 3 are in and tightened, I'll drill these outside 2 and add a screw to them as well. So it'll have it'll be attached to the boat in 5 places here. And I'll also glue where it meets the edge of the carling here and on this side. So it'll be attached really, really well. And then of course when the sub deck gets put on, it'll all be glued to it. But I wanted to put a support on each side of the helm where the helm unit is, because you're not going to crawl in and out of the boat by grabbing onto the steering wheel, but I wanted a little added support, you know, for torque on that. So I added that as well. Something else I did right here is the cutout for our Pioneer media player. I built this little bracket. Here is the sleeve that the deck slides in. You can see there's 2 little stainless screws, countersunk, and I screwed them, it's about a 1/4 inch. I recessed the blocks back. So this, you can see the bare spots there and the corresponding screw holes. That screws into that. And I cut this hole the exact outer dimension of the plastic face bezel on the deck. So when the deck's in there, it's a perfect fit to that. And then hopefully you can see, I round over, took my my DeWalt router again and round over this edge so it's super clean. Turned out really nice. Deck looks really good in there, and we'll get some updates of that here in a little minute. But making fantastic progress. As soon as that dash sets up, then I'll clamp it in there, mark all my contact areas, pull it back out, sand them all up, epoxy it, screw it all in, and then the dash is officially in the boat. And from there we can get the deck permanently mounted, and we'll probably start some wire and running cables at that point. So we're making great progress. Holy new shop lights, Batman. Finally good lighting in my garage again. And it only cost me 2 ballasts, 2 new bulbs, $90 frickin' dollars. These damn lights are draining the life right out of me. But we can see. So I'm guessing we'll probably have these 2 over here ballast die, or these 2 within the next week, if we're going off of history. Finally, good lighting. Here's a quick little update. We've got our kicker speakers installed in the front of the boat. I built these little mahogany brackets to kind of cradle the speaker, and then on this side, so it screws in on this side, it sits on top of this little angle iron bracket. So this front one's done, this front one's done. This back one over here, I just have to screw it to my little mahogany bracket, and it's done. And that side over there, I haven't installed the angle iron. You can see all the clamps holding it on. I guess it's angle aluminum. And I haven't screwed the speaker in also. So we're about 90% done with this one. We're about 30% done with that one. The front 2 are done. But this little angle aluminum, it's 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, 16th thick. It weighs next to nothing, and it is so inexpensive. I ordered it through McMaster Car. You can go to McMasterCar.com and order it, and car is with 2 R's. But I ordered 5 4-foot sticks, and it was like $12. It's super, super light. It's plenty strong enough to land my speaker on over here. It is secured with stainless screws. Here, here, and here. There's 3 in this one. And what I had to wait, it's funny, everything in this boat's been sequential. There's been a lot of pre-planning, but I had to get the dash in so I knew where I had to make my cutout for the deck, and I had to get the deck in so I knew where to mount my speaker, and then I matched the speaker in the same position on the other side, even though there's no clearance issues over there, or there's no location problems. I just wanted it to match. With the rear speakers, I basically mounted them where they would fit. And everything clears. There'll be plenty enough room to run my cable behind the deck, between the magnet and the side of the boat here, through this frame, and it'll kind of curve out around behind between the magnet and this side of the boat, and then curve around to the outboard position. So we're making good progress. This angle aluminum serves two purposes. It's where I'm landing my speakers on for one half of the speaker mount, but the bottom is also the perfect width to mount my 50/50 LED RGB strip lights. So my LED strip lights. And I kept the bottom of this angle, the bottom of my block, and the bottom of the sleeve for the deck all the exact same height. So I can run that RGB LED strip light all the way across the bottom of them. It'll be the same level. So I won't have to, you know, cut them short here. It'll run all the way across like nothing were there. And it's spaced up about a ½ inch from the bottom of the carling. I don't know if you'll be able to, yeah, you can kind of see it there. So anyhow, so they'll be hidden. You won't see them. Looking in from the side of the boat, you won't be able to see them. Looking even clear down into here, you won't be able to see them. But they're close enough to the bottom of the carling that it'll really illuminate the boat really well. So there'll be LED over here, LED over here, LED down this side, on the inside of frame 2, all the way across, shining down, and then behind the dash as well, shining down. So it's gonna light up and look awesome. Making fantastic progress, just chugging along. All right, it's officially April 1st, April Fool's Day, 2016. For the month of March, we went up 35.5 hours in March. Put a whole bunch of hours into the boat, feel pretty good about it. With any luck, I can continue putting in good hours each month. So 35.5 hours. Of that, 23 hours were on building the dash, and the remaining 12 and change I added up here to deck framing. So anyhow, we went up 35.5 hours, and most of that was on the dash. We went up $205.84. So that brings us up to the, let's see here, the 35.5 hours brings us up to 401 total hours into the boat. So milestone, we cracked another 100 hours, 401. And the $205.84 brings us up to $5,839.84 invested. So let's talk about some of the things we bought this month. Some of that $205. So obviously we bought our adjustable circle cutter or hole saw. This is that GM headlight switch that you can see where I've modified this bracket here. Normally it would just attach with female threads in there. So I took the bracket apart. You can see the little tack welds, fresh paint. Took the switch all apart, built this screw-on bracket so it screws to the back of my dash. And here's the chrome little knob and the, I guess we could call it post that the knob goes on, the actuator post, or anyhow. So there's the headlight switch and that, circle cutter. This is 4-gauge wire, 15 foot of each. This is going to be my main battery run back from the battery in the back of the boat up to a couple of post terminals split off to the amp and continue from the post terminals forward to the fuse box. So it's a 4-gauge run. I know that's monstrous, but that's what that 1,000-watt kicker amp requires. They recommend 4-gauge wire. This is a terminal crimper. So basically these are my 4-gauge terminals, you can see. So I'm going to put this guy in here. You lift it up, put it in there. You put your stripped wire inside, whack this guy with a hammer, and that crimps it. Crimps your wire into there. On top of that, I'm also going to heat these up and fill them with solder after they're crimped, and then I'll slip over heat shrink tube down into almost to the ring terminal and shrink that on there to make them triply sealed. So again, they'll be crimped, they'll be solder melted into them after the crimp, and then a heat shrink tube over the top of them. So we bought that. We bought these ring terminals. This is a 150 amp DC circuit breaker, inline circuit breaker. So we'll come out of the battery into it, and then out of it up into our posts. Here's a couple of the posts. There's a positive and negative 3/8 stud post. and there's an added negative, and we'll get into that later. The ignition switch, these are 10 millimeter. These are basically quick connects for the RGB strips. So when I start cutting the strips, you pop these little guys open, little dielectric grease, slip them on, snap them closed. So you don't actually have to solder to the little circuit board inside there that the LEDs are on. Just kind of a quick, easy way to cut that 50/50 RGB stuff to length and connect it, and then I'll solder from here on out with my extension wire. And also the 1/2x1/2 16th inch angle iron from McMaster. So there's a good portion of our money spent this weekend. Let's I'll give you a quick little update. So here's where we are. All the pretty stuff's obviously back out of the dash now, so I could do some work on it. But the dash is officially mounted in the boat, glued. It's there. It's never coming out again. And then last night I faired the top of the dash to match the angle or the curve of the hull. So that's done. All of our little speaker brackets now are officially done, glued in. I just used 1.5 inch silicon bronze screw to hold them there until the epoxy set. You can see the epoxy out the side here. But all 4 of our mid speaker mounts are in and done. You can see this here will be an LED strip mount. Again, it's that 1/2x1/2 16th angle. So it's spaced about a 1/2 inch up from the bottom of the frame, so you won't be able to see the lights looking in, but they'll shine very, very bright, illuminate the entire bottom of the boat. It's going to look awesome. So I got that in most of the way. I ran out of screws. I have to go pick up some more screws, and I'll do basically the same thing here on the back side of my dash as well, also shining down. So that's where we're at. We're making fantastic progress. Obviously, the vast majority of my time this month went into the dash. I'm incredibly happy with how it turned out. It is truly beautiful. So, you know, I'm not sure where we're going to go from here. I've got so much other crap I can do. I can go in about 10 different directions. I could slide my tank in and build my mounts for my fuel tank. I could start my 4-gauge wire run. I could start my fuse box to gauges and interior wiring. I could start mounting my interior lights. I could build the motor well. I've just got a million directions I could go right now. So anyhow, we're making fantastic progress. The zip is just, it's looking more and more beautiful. Every month, just more and more beautiful. It's so fantastic. I am so impressed by the work I'm able to turn out. I had hoped that it would turn out this good, but I really had no idea. I knew I could do it when I started the project. I just didn't know how it was gonna look, and it's exceeding my expectations. So thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, rate, and comment. Give me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you on the next update of building the Zip.